So you want to understand hearing loss, do you? Well, that's a pretty morbid topic. But you know what? It's probably better that you understand it so you can prevent it. Alright, so let's look at a picture of an ear, because you need to know how the ear works in order to understand hearing loss. Now, if you look at this picture, you'll see there's all kinds of tiny little parts and pushy thingies, and you probably have no idea what half of these little things are for. And if that's the case, you're in the right place. If you do know what all these little things are for, skip ahead, say 1, 2, 3 minutes, because for the next 1, 2, 3 minutes, I'm probably just going to explain what all these little parts are for. So the first part we'll look at is the part we're probably most familiar with, the pinna. You may never heard that term before, but it's the large structure located on the outside that we all see. That's called the pinna. It's shaped in a certain way that it picks up some frequencies better than others, but the basic job of it is to transfer the sound into the ear canal. Now let me tell you a fun fact though about the pinna. Humans can generally hear anywhere from 20 hertz all the way up to 20 kilohertz. Well, granted that they have perfect normal hearing. I, on the other hand, can hear up to about 17,600 kilohertz, something like that. Oh, wait a minute. Whoa, that's a huge number. I'm sorry. 17,600 hertz. If I could hear 17,000 kilohertz, I would be superhuman. Anyways, with that being said, though, we tend to be more sensitive to frequencies around 4 kilohertz. And the reason is because the pinna transfers those frequencies better than it does others. That's why we're more sensitive to them. It's a good thing, though, that we're sensitive to some frequencies more than others, because around that frequency range, that's where a lot of consonants and speech tend to occur, too. If we couldn't hear the consonants and speech well, speech would sound really muffled, which we don't want. That's also what hearing loss sounds like. You'll find out later in the video. Now, as the sound gets transferred through the ear canal and then hits the eardrum, there's actually a fancy name for the eardrum. It's called the tympanic membrane. I know, it's a fancy name for a piece of skin that vibrates when sound hits it. Then that sound is then transferred to the middle ear, which has 3 tiny bones called the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. Now the malleus is a small bone that's located right on top of the eardrum. It actually vibrates when the eardrum vibrates. It's transferred directly to it. The incus is like a little mediator. It transfers the information to the stapes, which then transfers the sound onto a very small area located on the cochlea. Now let me explain something here. The eardrum is a large surface area. So when it vibrates, it's a small intensity sound. However, these little bones transfer to a really small surface area on the cochlea, which amplifies the sound because it's a smaller surface area, same force. This is good because if this didn't happen, the sound would not be strong enough for us to hear it very well, and it wouldn't transfer through the cochlea very well. The cochlea has fluid in it. Fluid is harder to push than air. That's also a reason why it needs to be amplified. Now let's look at the cochlea, because this is where the real exciting stuff occurs, okay? So the cochlea, it looks like a little snail-like structure, right? It's quite interesting to look at, but there's a lot more to it than that. If you go and look at a small diagram of it, this is a cross-sectional diagram, you'll see that there's all kinds of little cells and also little pushy thingies located within this little pushy thingy. Yeah, it gets complicated. Just bear with me, okay? Now, if you look at the little blue dots on this diagram, this is all hand-drawn, okay? So these are just little colors and things to help you better see. It doesn't really look like this in real life, okay? Just a little disclaimer. Now, the little blue dots, the big blue blobs with the little blue dots located in them, the little blue dots are actually nuclei of cells, okay? They're cells, all right? These are called hair cells that are located inside your cochlea. Now, the outer hair cells, which I have circled here, their job basically is to pick up information and amplify it even further. There's a lot of amplification that goes on inside the ear. It's really complicated because there's so much amplification. It needs to be amplified so that the signal's right, okay? When that gets amplified, then it gets sent to the inner hair cell, okay, which then picks up the signal and transforms it into electrical information, which is then sent to the brain through the auditory nerve. Now, how does that information even get to the hair cell? Let's look at the hair cell itself. You'll see these little hair-like structures located on top, hence the name hair cell. These are like little cilia. What happens is if they get pushed or bent over, It causes the cell to set off some chemical reactions, which then transforms the information into electrical energy, which is then sent to the brain. How do they get bent, though? I mean, they look like they're just sitting there floating in space, right? Well, as I told you, the cochlea is filled with fluid, okay? When the incus, let's go back to that diagram, when the incus pushes against the cochlea, it pushes the fluid located inside the cochlea. It's still sound information, it's still mechanical energy, alright? But instead of air waves, we got water waves. These water waves then push against the basilar membrane. That's the large structure that all these little hair cells are located in, which then pushes it up and causes it to vibrate. However, this structure on top, called the tectoral plate, does not move. So when the basilar membrane pushes up into the tectoral plate, it pushes these cilia up into it as well and causes them to bend. That's the mechanical information that gets transferred to the cell, which then gets transferred into electrical energy, which is then sent to the brain, so we can hear it, and we hear it as sound. That's how it works. In an ideal situation anyways, that's how it works. Now, you start to expose yourself to loud noise. What happens is these little cilia on top of the hair cells start to get damaged, break off, and they do not, and I repeat, they do not grow back. So once they get broke off, you're kind of stuck without. And if the hair cell isn't there to be pushed over, the information can't get sent into the cell, and eventually the cell itself will die. And if the cell's dead, the information is not going to get to the brain. You're simply not going to hear it. But here's the thing. Some hair cells die off quicker than others. Let's go back to the pinna. The pinna amplifies some frequencies better than others. The 4 kilohertz, remember when I mentioned that? This is why, with noise-induced hearing loss, people tend to lose information at the 4 kilohertz range faster than they do at other frequencies. Do you want to know what that sounds like? Let me show you what it actually sounds like and how it affects you when you start to lose your hearing and when these hair cells start to die off.